Hello, everyone. This is Rufus Thibodeaux, and welcome to another episode of Promise and Purpose, where we talk about the transformative power of God's Word and how that links to us discovering our purpose and unlocking our untapped potential. And today, I'm excited to be with Pastor Davis Johnson. You're the only Davis. Well, I only know one other Davis, man. That's my uncle. So you're in good company. But anyway, and we're going to continue our conversation around how aligning yourself with the promises of God leads to a deeper understanding of your purpose and the potential that lies on the inside of you. So, hey, man, I was super excited to talk to you. And I know we were sort of talking before we started recording, but I was, yeah, you've got to be the coolest pastor I know. And in the terms, dude, so I took a lot of notes, and in fact, I was sharing my notes when so as I mentioned to you, Andy and I are in BSF together. So we meet on Mondays. So right after that service on that next Monday, I was sharing with the notes that I learned from you. And actually, there was a couple of terms, man, that you used that I thought were killer that I had never even heard before. So I wrote them down. I'll tell you what they are. No, they're good. They're good. So double click. I was like, man, do you remember even saying that? Is that something
No,
you
I do
said?
not remember
You
saying
said
that. That's
you
funny though.
said you were talking about Romans 12:1, 1 and 2, and you said, hey, you know what? And so I had to double click on that. I mean, I just was like, that requires some deeper thought. So let's double click on that. I was like,
Oh,
man,
sure.
that's cool. And then you said system error. She uses all these technology terms. I don't know if that's your background. You're like, you know what? I was reading it, and yeah, it might cause a system error. You know what I mean? But I was like, man, that is epic. That's cool. So anyway, a lot of terms, man. You're a cool guy. So I'm not going to just continue to talk about all the stuff I thought was cool about you, but I want to get into your story a little bit. But let's first maybe introduce yourself, and then just tell a little bit about your background and the work that you do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on your show, man.
Yeah,
It was a real pleasure getting to know you when you came and visited Hope.
yeah.
For your listeners, I had a cool interaction with Rufus when he came up, and he said he's from Apple Valley, and I said, "Oh, I got to introduce you to somebody else from Apple Valley." And I brought him over to the couple that actually brought him to church that Sunday. I
That's
was like, well, I
hilarious.
look, speaking of being a cool pastor, I look pretty cool right now.
Yo, it's
Introducing you.
totally cool. But I totally appreciated what you're trying to do. And I've never
Oh,
had
that's
that really
funny.
happen to try to connect me. So I was like, no, I totally appreciate it. So it's no problem at all.
Yeah, we're just here in downtown Minneapolis. And so it's pretty rare that we have folks from the boonies of Apple Valley, as I was
Yeah.
telling you earlier. So
Yeah.
yeah, my name is Davis. I'm a pastor here, right next to the Viking Stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And I've been doing this for about 8 years. I'm actually heading on my first sabbatical here in a few weeks. Very excited for that. And in terms of background, I came out of the business world. I was an investment banker and then a management consultant. And I thought, I bet I could make more money as a pastor. And so I went to seminary and teamed up with the folks here at Hope
Oh my
in the
gosh.
hopes of actually planting a church. That was always kind of going to be my track. I was just, especially coming out of the business world, I was just so taken by church planting and that whole world. It just seems so upside down compared to the business world, where, at the end of the day, what is a business? You're selling something, product or service,
Right.
and you take that money that you get and you put it back into the business and you grow the business. And then I came to learn of church planting, and it was you give away the gospel, raising up leaders. And rather than keeping those leaders in the church to build a mega church, you send those leaders out to start new churches. And with them, usually go your favorite 10% of people. It's the early
Right.
adopters, it's the hand
Right.
raisers, it's the volunteers, the givers, the people you really like having around. And I had seen this church do it 10 times. And I thought, if I'm going to learn how to do that, I got to team up with these guys. And that was 8 years ago. And the Lord actually kind of pivoted our direction, and we decided to stay here when plant our flag here at Hope and not go and plant, but instead be a catalyst for other planters while we continue to minister to 20s and 30s and 40 somethings here in Minneapolis. And so it's been a ride. And like I said, I think I'm ready for a sabbatical.
I love it. It's interesting. You mentioned upside down. That was actually one of the books you mentioned, Upside Down Spirituality, in your message. And
That's right.
you're right. I mean, that's how the kingdom of God is. I mean, you get by giving, you live by dying. I mean,
Mm,
this is it's all upside down. So I mean, that's totally appropriate. So I want to get so I hope you're ready for these questions, man. I'm bringing the heat with these questions. I'm just letting you
Hit me,
know.
man.
Just letting
I'm
you know.
ready.
You
You know,
ready? All
I'm
right.
I'm I'm kicking my feet up after this and going on sabbatical. So
So might as well
let's
get it
go
over
for
with.
it.
Get it over with. So man, I didn't know you were investment banker. That's high level, man. How long did you do that?
That was shorter than the management consulting side of things. I got burnt out real fast in investment
Okay.
banking. The hours were
Crazy.
insanity. And I didn't have a wife at that time. And I was like, well, I
Uh
probably won't be able to meet one if
yeah,
I'm
that's
always
pretty
in the
serious.
office.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was pretty short, but the business consulting side was a little bit longer.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get into the business journey and maybe some of that stuff in a minute, but I want to talk about um some more, I guess, the other side of the journey, so maybe the dark side. I want to know, like,
Mm.
how well, if you've ever had any situations where you had to deal with, feelings of unfulfillment or disconnection from your potential, and how did you deal with that? What strategies did you find helpful in overcoming those kinds of challenges?
I love it. That's a good question. I think when it comes to unfulfillment, there is for me, if we want to just double click on it,
Yes, don't click on
like
it.
you're
We can go
saying,
up and to we can go up and to the right on that. We might not be able. I got a ton of terms, but I wrote them all down.
yeah,
So
that's
anyway,
good. Feelings of unfulfillment, they're so common to the human experience. And I
sure.
think I have some form of that every day that ends in Y.
Yeah.
And in one sense, I think when we first feel them, we're like, this is such a bad thing, and I need to get out from underneath this.
Right.
But to go back to your comment of the upside down spirituality, I think one of many things that's so unique about biblical Christianity is it invites us into reality rather than has us hide from it. And so with feelings of unfulfillment, I think there is an invitation to be had by going, what story are we living in? Like, where are these feelings of unfulfillment coming from? And there's kind of two paths that come out of that question. The first is to say, when it comes to the story, you have to like locate yourself within reality. And reality consists of a few questions. Where do we come from? What went wrong? Like
Right.
I've been doing ministry now for 8 years, and nobody actually needs to be proven. Nobody needs to be convinced that sin is a real thing, because you just
Right.
open your eyes and you look around and you're like,
Boom.
dude, stuff is
It's
wrong.
right there. Yeah, yeah, right, right.
Genesis 3 is real and things are not the way they're supposed to be. So where do we come from? What went wrong? What's going to make it right? And where are we ultimately going? And I think once you locate yourself with those four questions, you're able to go, oh, these feelings of unfulfillment, they often come about because I'm not buying into God's answers to those
Mm,
questions. Instead, I'm usually locating myself as the center of the story and
gotcha.
thinking that what I really need is to be some form of God of my
Mm,
life, to have some form of his job description. Which, if you back the bus up back to Genesis 3 again, you go, that's kind of the original sin. That's kind of the
mm,
thing that leads to all of our forms of
right.
unfulfillment and all of our forms of disillusionment in this life. And so I find that going to those questions are helpful for me, because I'm able to go, oh, wait, I think some of this sense of unfulfillment is coming about because I'm trying to take what's not mine. And first and foremost, that's God's job description. Like God, his job description is to be king. His job description is to get glory. And often when I'm a taker of those things is when I find my sense of unfulfillment and my sense of discontentment.
Gotcha.
Like Paul talks about godliness with contentment is of great gain. Like if you needed a motto for your life, it's like, dude, go after that. That has a great return on your investment. And you can double down on godliness with contentment wherever you are, regardless of the circumstance and situation. So it's kind of a convoluted answer, but I do
Yeah,
think that whenever you feel something like this, the invitation from the God of the Bible is not to flee from it and try and solve the problem,
sure.
but to first take a step back and go like, what story am I in today? Does the story involve God being the center and creator and redeemer of all things, and ultimately his son coming to make right which we broke? Or is the story more about me and me finding what I think my sense of fulfillment comes from apart from God?
Yeah,
Because it's a mercy of God that we would be unfulfilled in that. The last thing I'll say on that is
yeah.
I think of Augustine's prayer where he says to God, "Fill our mouths with salt, so that we might thirst after you."
Hmm.
And so that sense of disillusionment or unfulfillment that we feel, in one sense, and this is the upside down reality, because nobody
Yeah.
wants to feel unfulfilled and
Right.
disillusioned.
Right. Right.
But what if it is God filling our mouths with salt, like Augustine prayed, so that we could be made whole, so that we could have our thirst quenched by the one who came and died for us and rose again, because in him is life and truth and the way itself. And so that is just a kind of an upside down approach, I think, to
Yeah.
that unfulfillment reality. And I think it's
Yeah.
good news.
I think it is good news, and I agree with 100%. But that reminds me of one of the things that Paul said about the whole idea of getting strength within weakness, and
Yeah.
that's sort of an upside down thing too. I mean, it's like he was cool with adversity because he knew that that's when God's power showed up the strongest, kind of, you know what I mean? So I think yeah, but I think we do. I mean, the kingdom of God is upside down, so we have to look at things in reverse, and I think that's cool. But we already talked about several biblical principles already, but I'm curious, have you can you share an instance where you kind of struggled to apply a biblical principle to your everyday life, and then again, how did you ultimately overcome that?
Yeah, my mind jumps to, if I can go big picture one more time.
Yeah, sure.
I'm kind of a big picture guy.
I see that. I like that. I like
I'm
that.
more of a forest than the trees, and that's true of my engagement with the Bible. Even in
Mm,
my I feel like some of my initial training in the Bible really did a lot of like zooming in
okay.
on like one Greek word, and you really got to unpack that Greek word and get into the
Sure.
grammar, and I find that can be compelling and
Yeah.
helpful at times. But I think the thing that keeps me in ministry and the thing that keeps me coming back is the difference between zooming in and zooming out and seeing the big story unfold.
Okay.
And the language we like to use at Hope a lot is that we read the Bible from left to right,
Huh.
but we interpret it from right to left.
Okay.
And so I'm around to answering your question, but I
No
want
problem.
to
Yeah.
take this scenic route
Sure.
because it'll make sense with some of the main biblical principles that I think I often struggle with,
Okay.
which is ultimately like, who's in charge? Is it
Mm.
me? And kind of co-pastoring with God in my life, or like co-working with him to bring about the kingdom
Right.
of God in my midst, or is it God alone doing the work and getting the glory? And obviously, if you frame it that way, I think all Protestants would be like, yeah, I think it's God, man. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
but
Right.
when you're reading the Old Testament from left to right, there's this tension, right? There's this feeling of like, is it all God, or is it like a partnership where,
Hmm.
he says to Abraham when he first gives him the promise of like, I'm going to be the one who's going to establish you, and who's going to give you a land, who's going to give you an inheritance, and your people are going to be as numerous as the stars. And I'm going to be the one that's going to walk through this covenant alone without you in Genesis 15. But then 2 chapters later, he has them do the circumcision covenant where he's like, you got to do this. Otherwise,
Mm.
we're not on good terms, right? And so there's
Right.
this tension that I think the Old Testament presents for us, which is to say, is it 100% God, or is it like 50-50, or maybe like 80-20? Like I at least am doing 20 or 90-10. It's just this
Yeah.
feeling like, how do we know? And one of the things, a mentor friend of mine, gosh, it must have been almost 7 years ago now, walked me through the story of Jonah, which for a
Mm.
lot of people is very familiar. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you've heard the
Right.
story of that dude that got swallowed up by a whale.
Jonah
And
the whale. Right. Right.
there you go. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the like, is that physically possible? I think
Mm.
there's some good questions and some great commentaries that people can lead you towards. I just frankly don't care as much about that question. And the thing I do care about though is how much the right to left reading happens in the story of Jonah. What I mean by this is
Yeah.
Jesus himself is constantly challenging people in how they interpret the word. You think of John 3, where Nicodemus is coming to him at night and he's like, hey, man, I can see you know the Bible, but like, I got to ask you some stuff. And Jesus just kind of stops him. He's like, hey, if you want to see the kingdom of God, you have to be born again. And this, of course, for Nicodemus, he's like, I don't understand what's happening here. What do you mean? The mechanics, the science, it doesn't work. I'm bigger than my mom now. I don't think I can crawl back in there. And Jesus is like, no, really, if you want to see the kingdom of God, you have to be born again. And Nicodemus still doesn't get this. And Jesus finally says something that is so important for the way we understand the Old Testament. He says to Nicodemus, "You're Israel's teacher, and you still don't understand these things?" In other words, I think I need to take your teacher's license back, because you and I were teaching from the same book, but you didn't come to the conclusion that you were supposed to in reading it, that you need to be born again. And ultimately, that birth is going to come through the Messiah in the upside down way of his death causing life. So if that's the story, and we come back to Jonah, and we're actually now charged with the ability to see, we see this theme throughout. And one of my favorite places, it's when the sailors are trying to get out of the storm that
Okay.
God sends to Jonah as a like, hey, all sins have punishments, and you're running away from me. And so this storm is a physical embodiment of that spiritual running away from me. And Jonah comes up from the bottom of the deck, and he's like, what's going on, guys? And the sailors are all like, look around, we're all about to die. And Jonah's like, yeah, this is my fault. If you want to take care of this, throw me off the deck and I'll drown, and the storm is going to go away. Now, I pause for a second. Like, if
Yeah.
you're the sailors here, what are you thinking? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking get rid of the guy. I don't know. What should I be thinking?
Yeah, I mean, if I think some of the sanctified ones among them were probably like, hey, this guy's onto something.
Yeah.
But if you're a sailor with lots of experience, you're like, dude, I've seen storms before. That's gonna do nothing. I'm going back to my oar, and I'm gonna row. And it says that actually in Jonah 1, it says the sailors, when they heard this
Yeah.
upside down solution to their problem, they
Sure.
went, that sounds kind of dumb. And they went back to their oars to row. And it says they rowed as
Mm.
hard as they could. And then this is profound. But the storm grew worse than
Ah.
it did before. So when you and I grab the oars of life
Yeah.
and we think, I'm going to help God out, I'm going to steer myself out of here, I'm going to get myself out of this problem, out of this situation, out of this sense of unfulfillment, out of the fill in the blank.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is the principle that I personally struggle with the most, I think, in my life, is like when stuff hits the fan,
Yeah.
I feel like my job and my obligation is to grab the oars and steer
Um,
myself, my church, my family, my wife, like all these things out.
yeah.
But the storm grows worse than it did before, until finally they're led to wit's end and they go, all right, we got nothing to lose.
Just
Let's
throw the
throw this
guy
guy off the
overboard.
deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they do, and the storm ceases, and all these men praise God. Now, when Jesus tells that story, he says something greater than Jonah is here. Because like Jonah, Jesus himself is a prophet, but unlike Jonah, Jesus is not disobeying God. He's obeying God
Mm.
and running into the storm, into the ultimate storm. He's not saving just a few sailors. He came to
Yeah.
save the cosmos. He came to save the universe. He came to save sinners like you and I, who are trying to save ourselves. And so for me, this is that right to left reading that not only unlocks the word, but gives us answers to some of these greater questions that we have. These questions about our unfulfillment, these questions about the struggles that we have in our daily lives, and our ability to overcome these challenges. That at the end of the day, it isn't how well or how hard I can row. It's not the size of my biceps and my ability to pick up that oar and just start going to town.
Yeah.
It's in fact God granting me the faith to put that oar down and go,
Mm.
this sounds crazy, but somehow the solution to my problem is in that prophet jumping into the storm on my behalf. And when I see it happen, the storm ceases,
Yeah.
and I praise God and give him glory.
Yeah. It's crazy because I've experienced that a lot. I'm sure we all have. When I like I mentioned to you, I before we started recording here, I was looking for some different results. So instead of going right, I've been going left, and it's been totally outside of my comfort zone. But that's what needs to happen. And like you said, something else. I thought of another story while you're talking about Jonah, and I thought about the prodigal son. But from a kind of a different perspective, the idea of the young son, whatever, I don't know if the old, but the one that left, he was upset, came back. He didn't think they thought because of what he did wrong, he didn't have a sonship place again. He had to come in and, okay, if I could just be a servant, I'm good. The other son was like, hey, I've been doing all the right stuff. So, hey, why didn't you throw me a party? And one of the things I saw, and that I relate that to my own life, is that it didn't have anything to do with the works. Like you said, I think I need to row harder. I need to do some more, I need to do more push-ups. I mean, no, it's not that. It's just recognizing who you are and whose you are, and not, you
Mm.
know, and not in the work side. It's just, you know what I mean? So, but that's a hard thing to do. Like you said, you, especially being the guy, you're the head of the house. I mean, you feel like, hey, you know, I gotta get out there and make it happen, you know? So, but that's again, the upside down kingdom. It's not that way. It doesn't work that way. So what do you think the role of community has to do with this? I mean, that was a sense that I got from you guys' church. One of them, I had a great time in a lot of things, but the sense the community is a really seems to be a really big deal. And so, how has community affected your spiritual growth, and how do you currently engage with, you know, fellow believers to strengthen your walk, and, you know, with other guys, other people, and with God?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, man. We often joke at Hope that community is our middle name, and it's a little
Hmm.
tongue in cheek, but it's Hope Community Church, and so no, we like
Ah,
literally mean it is our middle name.
nice, nice, nice.
But I think when I first came to faith, you know, my sense of who I was really rooted in being one of four brothers, and so
Hmm.
that's what the family I come from, and you know,
Okay.
that was always like a really big part of, you know, the way I moved through the world and how I processed things, and I always had this to fall back on. But when I became a believer, it was actually at Hope, and
Hmm.
I had some very ordinary people ask some very ordinary questions, things like how are you, you know,
Hmm.
and it's like good, and they'd say things like, no, how actually are you, you know, like what's
Hmm.
actually going on in your life, and then they did this crazy thing where they listened and then
Wow.
they asked more questions, and very quickly this started to go down the path of like, whoa, we're talking about things that I've never talked about with my brothers, things like what am I afraid of, things like
Hmm.
what do I really struggle with at the end of the day, where do I get caught up, where do I get stuck in my own head,
Yeah.
and very basic, ordinary things. And you know, we had a couple of weeks after you came, we walked through Romans 12, 9 through 21, which is this really down to earth, rubber meets the road description of what biblical spirituality actually looks like.
Okay.
And contrary to kind of the spirituality of our age, which says you are a unique individual and you need to solve this mysterious puzzle of spirituality as an individual and then tell us about this interaction with the cosmos or your experience of your personal deity or universe or God. Romans 12, 9 through 21 just says, hey, do you want to know what spirituality actually is? It looks like weeping with those who weep. It looks like
Wow.
rejoicing with those who rejoice. It looks like associating with the lowly and not being taken hold of by people who are really impressive and trying to get around them, but instead like showing up day after day in the lives of your neighbors and friends and small group and church, and giving a rip about them.
Hmm.
Not because this somehow does something for your relationship with God, but because God did this to you first in the person and work of his son. I think of Ephesians 4:32, where it says, hey, you should be kind to one another and forgive each other. Why? Because God in Christ forgave you. And so
Nice.
anytime the Bible is ever telling us to like do something for one another in the context of community, it's always either explicitly said, like in Ephesians 4:32,
Yeah.
or implicitly implied that the gospel is the reason for that. And it doesn't affect anything between you and God. Jesus took care of that. That was on his job description. He put it in cement that nothing is going to change between you and God now. But things can change between you and your neighbors. And guess what? Your neighbors are in desperate need of love. And so get
Yeah.
around them and show them this love of God that he has shown you in the person and work of his son. And for me, that was life changing.
Hmm.
And now I often like to say blood is thicker than blood. Not that I don't have a great relationship with my brothers. I just, my brothers and sisters in Christ now just have this inner access to me.
Yeah.
And you feel this when you go somewhere. Like you and I don't know each other super well, but even when we
Yeah.
hopped on this, it's like, brother, I got so much in common with you
Right.
because of the blood that we share, right?
That's
Like the
right.
blood that unites us. I just
That's
feel
right.
a confidence and an ability to share some of like my deepest stuff because I know at the end of the day, I don't need to impress you.
Yeah.
Because Jesus says you're impressive, not because of yourself, but
That's
because of
right.
me.
That's right. That's right. You know, I never really understood the power of community until recently. Now, so I grew up, my father was a pastor, mother and father were pastors. So
Oh,
my father led me to the Lord when I was 8 years old. So I've been born again about 47 years. But and I knew all the lingo, knew all the scriptures, you know what I mean? All the right things to say. But my father died about 8 years ago. It's interesting. I just read
wow.
his obituary just like 3 days ago. I had never read it because I couldn't, you know.
Oh
Just
man.
read it and was like, wow. So, but anyway, my point is that he taught me a lot of things about the Bible, and that when he died, that was really a tough time. I had a lot of questions, you know, yeah, just a lot of questions. And so, but it was my community. Short story, long story short, my community is what got me back on track, and I didn't see that till sort of after the fact. And man, I felt like the guy who, you know, the lame guy who his friends brought him to Jesus bust through the roof. Cause man, I was like, I needed help. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
I couldn't see where Jesus was. I couldn't get to him.
Yeah.
I felt like, you know, and so, but yeah, I understood that, man, the power of community is transformative, dude. I mean, yeah, it's everything. It's everything.
Yeah, it
Um,
really is.
yeah, it's something. So, I want to get to the investment banking, the all the stuff that you've done. Tell me a little bit about how you discovered your purpose. I mean, you've gone from investment banking to management consulting, you said, now you're a pastor. So how did you discover, yeah, your sense of purpose? And then what advice would you give to people that are still, you know, struggling to find a deeper sense of meaning and satisfaction in their lives?
Yeah, that's I think I got to dial the clock back to some of the things that it was a really hard transition to go
Was
from
it
the business world to ministry, and I just had no precedence in my family or
okay?
otherwise, you know, and family is made up of in the worldly sense of pretty successful people, and my dad's a doctor and
Mm,
kind of does business stuff on the side, and so kind of always grew up around this sense of like financial independence is the goal and what a successful life looks like. I don't think that message was explicitly said. It was just
mm,
kind of something that I heard by
sure.
looking, you know, out in front of me. And so the transition to ministry was one that wasn't made easily, but it kind of came from this unshakable, like I'd come home from work tired after a long day of work, and then I would open up some theology or a church planning book, and I just would kind of get jazzed about like
Okay.
this is cool, man. Like I just want to
Yeah.
read more about this. And so there was this inner passion that I think I couldn't deny, and I just found myself like there was just a lot of forward movement on these topics, and I would buy a cup of coffee for someone like yourself or
Mm,
people who had planted churches out of hope, and I just kind of wanted to hear like, what is your story? Because I always thought pastors were people that, you know, grew up in church and went to
yeah.
seminary and then became pastors. And didn't do any of those things. And then I met these guys who had planted these churches and they were crazy, all of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the best way.
Yeah.
But they were also a very motley crew. And what I mean by that is none of them were the same. Like all of them were
Mm,
super different.
okay.
And they were really believing that God knew what he was doing in wiring them the way they are. And so that was something that just really intrigued me. And I think I go back to community. I had some friends at the time who are still my dear friends who helped me process like this type of to jump out of one fishbowl into another. Some ingredients are helpful. You can think of them like three buckets,
Okay.
and are all three there. The first is that internal, like, what do I like? What do I want to
Mm,
do? What is that thing that just like, man, I find that there's an energy to it. Like if I start talking, it's like you put a quarter in. Like I just want to go, you know. And
yeah.
some people
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
talkers, but you might be, you know, you just want to read about it, you want to research, you want to explore this thing. That's the first bucket. It's kind of passion or desire or whatever you want to label it. Just this internal, like, oh, there's an energizer bunny in me towards this topic, and I want to be both feet in.
Yeah.
That's not everything though, and that's where I think our culture kind of sells us short because we're big on passion and you know
Yeah.
trying to find this thing where you'll never work a day in your life. It's like, listen to me, I love my job. I work every day of my life. There are things about my job
Right.
that I don't love, and you're going to find that everywhere. The grass is green enough wherever you are, but every job you go to, you're going to have things you don't like. We often say at Hope, like strive for the 80/20. 80% of your job you enjoy, 20% you got to
Nice.
put up.
Like it.
And if you can get to that sweet spot, that's a real gift of God. So inner passion, inner desire is the first bucket. Second bucket is outside affirmation.
Mm,
You got to have people around you that know you, that see you, that can recognize patterns. All of us just have a lot of blind spots, and we just can't see ourselves accurately.
yeah.
In fact, we are more mysterious to ourselves than we are found out. And so this is why living in the context of community, having a small group, having just a band of brothers and sisters around you that really know you. They don't have to be like you. It's in fact, it's better that they're not like you.
Yeah.
But you have shared, values and you're attracted to similar things. But then they can say like, hey, I think you'd be good at that, or I think you're on one of your crazy idea trains, and just give it a week and it's probably going to fizzle out, right?
Right.
Having people around you that do this is big. And then the last one is just opportunity. This one is allows us to speak out of both sides of our mouth, and saying, on the one hand, it's like if God's calling you to something, I think doors are going to open, and so like if you have that passion, if you have people around you that being like, yeah, I think you'd be really good at that. And then you have a door that's opening around you where you're able to actually go and try some of these things out. I think that's a good sign. Now, I say I'm going to speak out of the other side of my mouth, in that if those first two buckets are there, it doesn't mean necessarily that a door is automatically going to open for you. Like when you go to Target and those, automatic doors just like, come on into Target and buy a bunch of stuff, right?
Right.
Instead, there are times where you got to run through a wall. And this is where it's really important to have people at your back who are like, no, I really do think you should run through that wall, or stop hitting your head against that thing. I don't think you're supposed to go that way. And so those three buckets are crucial. And I definitely had them. And then I started part-time at Hope when I first began, and it was right when I was meeting my wife. And that's how I knew she wasn't a gold digger. And so we got married a year later. So I was like, I'm leaving a really good job.
That's
work
funny.
part-time at a church and go to school.
So did she know you when you were in the investment banker only, or the consulting, or only in the
She had
ministry?
met me like right when I was transitioning to work on staff. And so
Gotcha. Gotcha.
wild
Yeah.
story for another time.
Love it. Wow, crazy. And how long have you been married, did you say?
We're coming up on our 7th year here
Okay.
in May.
All right. Nice. Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
My parents used to say, look at marriage in terms of years of marriage in terms of life. Like if you're 7 years married, you're like 7-year-old. I've been married 30 years, like a 30-year-old. So it's kind of funny when I hear people married, like, oh, okay, he's still a toddler. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They're teenagers. Oh, okay.
Still wet in the bed.
Still wet in the bed. That's right. A 7-year-old trying to tell me,
sure
anyway, yeah, it's funny. But anyway, that's interesting. So have you ever had periods, man, where like spiritual stagnation, where you felt some inner conflict, and if you have, what did you do to get through that?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that, as I process it, it is I think we, if I rewind the clock, I think we used to use language like droughts. It's like, man, I just feel like I'm in a spiritual drought, like that fervency is not there. And I think with time, I'm realizing more and more like, oh, this is again like another one of those things that happens like all the time. Like there are the feelings meter is not firing on all cylinders. In fact, it rarely does.
Right.
But
true.
similar to marriage, it is this thing that like, man, when we first got married, there was that like, oh, passion. Like I'm just, whoa, you like me, I like you.
Let's do it. Yeah.
That passionate feeling. It's always meant to. I say this to every couple we do premarital with. Like that's an awesome feeling. It's a gift when it happens. Like this person falls out of the sky, and you're like, oh, you're awesome, and I want to be around you. And oh, you feel the same way. That's so cool. That feeling is really short. It has a short shelf life, and it's meant to. It's designed by God to fizzle out so that it can be replaced with something so much deeper, so much bigger.
Yeah.
And that is a covenant of love. And a covenant of love is not, it sounds like this big religious words, but in fact, if you double click on it, what actually is a covenant of love, but not the way that God ultimately moves towards us and surrounds his love that he actually has told us about with action. Like the thing that makes his love available to us is that he took action and continued to move towards us despite himself, despite ourselves and our running away. And then ultimately says, I ain't going nowhere. Like wherever you go, I'm going to be with you. Whatever happens, take heart. I've overcome the world. And so when you think of your relationship with God in the context of that covenant of love, you got to do two things. The first is to recognize it's not a two-way highway, or it's not even like out here in Minnesota, we got these, like if you drive up to Buffalo, sometimes you get a highway where like you got one lane and the oncoming traffic has 2 lanes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we think of a relationship with God like that. Like he's given us the 2 lanes of of grace and care and love, but we got to make sure we're driving back up vertically and doing these spiritual disciplines and reading our Bible and devotional and church and prayer and all these things. And listen to me, I love all of those things that I just said.
Yeah, sure.
However, you gotta realize that what the covenant of love between you and God is nothing like that highway. The covenant of love from God to you in the person and work of Jesus Christ is a one-way street from heaven to earth. It's like, this is why he made gravity, is to
Yeah,
show you like it only goes down. Okay. The
nice.
love that he has for you is something that he gives to you, and it's the change agent of your life. And to think otherwise is why I think we fall into these traps that we make for ourselves around spiritual stagnation, because we make it all about us and what we're doing for God, thinking
Interesting.
about that one way back up to heaven. But he wants you to go, hey, locate yourself under this fountain that I'm dropping from heaven. Like, position yourself under that by getting around people, by getting around the word, sure, but make sure you're reading the word well. Make sure you're interpreting it from right to left, because then you're going to start to see like, oh, this is all about him and what he's doing in the world, and way less about my spiritual disciplines, which again, I'm a fan of, but not in and of themselves. I'm a fan of
Sure.
them being in response or down. You can think of them being like downriver from the headwaters of the gospel. That God is the one who supplies the movement and the growth, and he's constantly talking and moving in your life. And he's speaking in ways that you and I are pretty deaf to. But
Yeah,
once we start to have ears to hear, once we start to have eyes to see, once we start to locate ourselves as the problem in the story, like every time Jesus does a miracle, every time he's actually healing somebody who has blind eyes
yeah.
or deaf ears or lame legs, he's always doing that as a sign to point to the fact that you and I are that deaf, blind, and lame person. Meaning we can't get up and get our way to God. We can't
Hmm.
drive on a highway to heaven. Nobody can. This is why
Yeah,
we're all so unfulfilled all the time, is we think
yeah,
we can, but we're constantly spiraling and spinning our wheels. And Jesus has come down from heaven
yeah.
in, like, he put on flesh, and this is what he's doing. He's coming to people and he's like, hey, let me give you eyes to see. Let me touch your eyes
Wow.
so that you might see. Let me touch your ears so that you might hear. Let me say, son, your sins are forgiven. Rise, take up your mat, and go home. Your ultimate home, namely God himself. But that happens through me. That happens through my work. And locating Jesus in these stories,
Yeah.
I think, is that theme that I continue to come back to, because this is the thing that causes, I think, a lasting spiritual tenor that looks more like a marriage, where
Hmm.
it's like, oh, regardless if I'm feeling it or not, I'm getting up and I'm putting those dishes away. Why? Because I love my wife, and she just
Right.
cooked a banger meal that was
Yeah.
so good. And I
Yeah.
love her, and like, that was just, and even, yeah, like that, I think that's such a difference than, oh, I just need to, stoke the fires today by doing the right stuff for God. It's just a different
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah. No, totally. I get that. Just like you said with marriage, you're committed to feel good. It may not always be there, but you're committed. This is, and I remember one of my mentors used to say, it might not feel good, but it produces good. So it's like you still want to do the same, do whatever you need to do and sort of fly by the
Mm.
instruments. So how do you recommend that people sort of navigate through doubts and uncertainty? I mean, we talked a little bit about, I mean, yeah, I mean, we've been all over the place, but I'm curious, how do you do that? So if I'm doubting and I'm uncertain about stuff, what's the strategy for, rekindling my relationship with God and kind of getting back on track with my spirituality?
Yes, yes. I love this question, because I think it's a place where we can go, okay, hold on. You have doubts?
Yeah,
Great. The opposite of faith is not doubt, not at all, right?
right,
The opposite of
right.
faith is fear or works. Like, that's the thing that God
Mm.
is always coming back to. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, works are the things that are opposed to each other, but doubts are like, that's par for the course.
Mm.
And that's what I appreciate. Two things that Jesus is doing regularly in ministry with people who
Yeah,
constantly are having doubts, right? They're
sure.
constantly filled with like, what's the way? He often does two things. One of which, I think of the story in John 6, when a bunch of people walk away from Jesus,
Oh yeah.
right? He had just fed 5,000 people, and they're like, this guy's a big deal, man. Let's make him king. Let's make him president. Let's put him over. He'll take care of our problems. Clearly, we know he knows what he's doing. And
Right,
then
right.
Jesus, seeing what they wanted to do, says some crazy stuff. You know what he says? He says, oh, you want to follow me? You need to eat my body and drink my blood. And when people hear this, they're like, peace out. I thought this guy was like a good leader, but he's weird.
Right.
He's
Deuces,
judging.
deuces, right here.
Like, that's different, right? I don't think I
Yes,
want to follow him.
that's way different.
And then something interesting happens. Jesus talks to Peter and he's like, wait, aren't you going too? And
Mm,
Peter says, where else would we go? You have the words of eternal life.
right.
And so what I see here is it's a great help to doubt. It's not meant to cure doubt. It's meant to help you. It's meant to, like, which way am I going? Where am I putting my doubts? Because at the end of the day, what you need to do with doubts is you need to look at them.
Hmm.
And the gospel is the thing that allows us again to see reality and not hide from it.
Right.
And when it comes to doubts, they're actually usually pretty weak.
Mm,
There's usually something that, like, I wonder if my life would be better if
okay.
I went somewhere else, right? And so it's like, okay, great. Think about it. Interrogate that doubt. Where else are you going to go? Where else are you going to find the story of God moving towards you in love and laying down his life for you? I'll tell you what you'll find out elsewhere in culture. Every single religion and every single person who says they're not religious will ultimately present to you the same thing. And that is, it's up to you.
Hmm.
Do you want a great life? Work harder. Do you want to be fulfilled?
It's
Put in
true.
the time. You get out what you put in. And the Old Testament is the story of how that doesn't work.
Good point.
Like, you could summarize the whole Old Testament under that, of when when human beings have the knowledge of good and evil, here's what you need to do. Now put in the work. How does it go? Well, things move from bad to worse to exile, and they don't come back without God's drastic intervention. It really is the story of two trees at the center of the garden. All stories lead back to the garden before they lead
Yeah.
to the cross. And God says at the center of the garden, there's these two trees. One of them is the tree of life, which we'll later learn totally is the cross.
Yeah.
It's God's plan A, and it's where Jesus is going to die so that all people will have eternal life in him. But the tree that gets chosen by human beings is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And with that, we believe we have the ability. It's not the tree of, like, go and do heroin. It's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
what is best and what is not. Do the good, avoid the evil is the thing that we think we can do. And when we have it, when we hold it, it looks like human beings under the law of Moses.
Yeah.
Do this and you'll have life. How's that go? They don't do this, and instead they have death. And you're gonna get tired, like, life
Yeah.
is gonna beat you. Life always wins. And when that happens, Jesus himself will always be there going, oh, look, you found the door to my office. It wasn't at the top of your rope of achievement. It was at the bottom of your rope. It's you falling off the ladder that you were climbing and realizing, like, oh, he was here the whole time and he never went anywhere else. So when it comes to doubts, man, I say interrogate them,
Yeah.
trace them to the root, and find, like, oh, where else would I go?
Yeah.
Because anywhere else I go, I get some system of religion, even if it's not being advertised as such. It's putting me in the center, and I need to bring something to the table in order to belong. And then the goalposts start moving, which brings us into a whole other conversation on culture. But again, we'll have
Yeah.
to do another on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna need to do a part 2 and a part 3, but I wanna, and that's, I think that's a great way to look at, I don't want to keep saying it over and over again, but still upside down kingdom, it's like to not be scared of it. So I'm having a doubt. So what? Okay, great. Let's talk about it. What? Talk about it. I need to, what I mean? It's just anti, what you've been, what we've been taught. And
For sure.
I think that's great. I have one more question. Actually, I have two more questions. I want to know about your favorite rap artists, man. I know, I remember you brought up a couple rap. Well, I guess you brought up one. You brought up Drake, and I think you brought up somebody else. I mean, what kind of music do you like?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. I think the unsanctified side of me, before becoming a believer, had a
Right.
lot. Eminem was always a
Oh, is that right? Okay.
instrumental guy, and yeah, I think now I listen back on some of his music, and I just recognize talent, man. Game recognized game, and I don't got game, but I recognize his game. And he's
Okay.
so gifted, so talented, but so
Yeah.
angry, and so I actually have a
Yeah.
harder time listening to him now. Um, but Avett Brothers, if you've heard of them, they've
I
become kind of
haven't.
my recent listen. Usually I find a band and I kind of go both feet in for a while,
Okay.
and then I get tired of them and move on. But right now it's Avett Brothers, and my wife and I are actually going to go see them at Red Rocks this year, so I'm looking
Oh,
forward to
nice.
that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of different scriptures. This is actually my last question. So a lot of scriptures, but I want to know what is the one Bible promise? Maybe it might be two or three, but that have been super instrumental in just shaping your walk, helping you to overcome challenges, help you fulfill, become the man that God is calling you to be. What would be that one Bible promise? And if it's more than one, I'm happy to talk about those
Yeah,
two.
let me give you a curveball with it,
Yes.
because I heard somebody last week say this, and I haven't stopped thinking about it because I think it's so accurate and I think it's so good. He said, I can summarize the Bible in 7 words.
Okay, let's do it.
I am God and you are not. That's what he said, is the whole Bible story. And I'm like, dude, that will preach. And it has been preaching in my heart. And so, like, again, as we've been talking,
Wow.
think about the way that comes up, especially as you're interpreting the whole Old Testament from right to
Yeah.
left. You see it again and again and again. Jesus is God and I am not. And
Period.
I fail to believe that every morning when I wake up, right? I'm filled with doubts. I'm filled with, I need to do this. I need to pick up my oars and row. But man, when I hear that from outside of me, when I read it in the word, when I hear a brother like you tell me,
Yeah.
Jesus is God and you are not, take a deep breath, let your shoulders drop a little bit, breathe in that fresh air of gospel relief and
Yeah.
get after it today. That's life-changing news. And it continues to change me from the inside out.
Yeah. Well, we'll let the mic drop on that one, man. I like that. And I would love to do a part 2 and part 3, man. I got a whole slew of questions I didn't even go through yet. I was waiting to talk to you. But seriously, man, I enjoyed it. I appreciate it. What are you doing for sabbatical? Can you share? Is it private?
Yeah. We got a
Oh.
big, we kind of have a thorough plan here at Hope for sabbatical so that people aren't kicking their feet up and watching Netflix for 3 months. We got
Okay.
like 9 buckets that we think through: intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, marital, relational. There's a couple other L's in there that
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not remembering right now.
No problem.
But our big focus is getting time with God that's unhurried and not for the sake of teaching, but just for the sake of us and our family.
Yeah.
I work with a guy named Core here, one of the pastors, and he said sabbatical for him was learning to follow Jesus as Core and not Pastor Core. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that I'm holding on to for my sabbatical, is following Jesus as Davis, not Pastor Davis. And so
Nice.
appreciate your prayers to that end, man. This has been a blast. I would
This
love
has been
to
great. Yeah, let's do it
join you
again.
again. It's
Yeah,
been
let's do it
great.
again. But hey, we'll have fun on your sabbatical. And hey, I might pop up again. You don't have to introduce me to my friend this time. Maybe I won't come with Andy. That way, you can introduce me to somebody else.
I
So
dig it. I dig it.
so you take care, man. It's been great. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Sounds good, brother.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.